Namarni. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. I wanted to lead off with the one bit of Ghana language that I know and I'm trying to continuously improve on, just to be able to, of course, as we acknowledge that our event is here, traditional lands of the Ghana people, who we pay our respects to past, present, emerging. We do also acknowledge that language is always a very important component of showcasing appreciation, awareness, and also appreciation of culture. So as even at ASBN continues to improve our own knowledge around our indigenous culture, where we live, we hope that everyone else in the room will be as well. We'd also like to acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We very much, as an organization, appreciate and respect our Aboriginal culture here across Australia, and also connection to land. And it's an ethic that we'd like to also try to perpetuate through the conversations that the ASBN holds and helps drive. A little bit of a geography lesson is that Tanzania, currently more widely known as Adelaide, South Australia, is where we obviously occupy, where we're hosting this event. The traditional lands of the Ghana people extend all the way actually to the Adelaide Hills, where it borders the Pamarak Nation, and also all the way down to the Florida Peninsula, which also is Ngarrindjeri land. And if we also think about our other neighboring Aboriginal communities up north toward the York Peninsula, that borders the traditional lands of the Naranga, Nukunu, and Ngadjuri people. So I hope we can all collectively embrace this acknowledgement of country. And once again, welcome everyone. My name is Ken Long, for those that don't know. Today is our actually the final event of 2021 for us at the ASBN, and we're very appreciative to be able to have it hosted here at U City. So big shout out to United Communities. Thank you very much for having us along tonight. It's also fantastic to be hosting events in buildings that actually sort of walk the walk when it comes to sustainability. So we also appreciate this this partnership with United Communities to be able to host events here. One of the big reasons for our discussion tonight, and many of the reasons why you all are here today, is around how do we go toward a more renewable future? And the interesting thing about here in South Australia is that we're sort of already trending in that positive direction, right? There's heaps of success stories. The South Australian story is a success story when it comes to renewable futures. It's something that we would like to actually see the majority of our nation actually look to and consider and also action on, mainly acknowledging that in this time of a climate emergency, there is a big need to actually think about where do we actually get our energy from, where are we sourcing it, and how we're generating it. And one of the big opportunities that come with that is not only the decarbonization of our electricity and grid, reducing carbon emissions from here, but also what are the fantastic opportunities that lie when we're actually going toward this low carbon future. And which also leads into a question on how does this actually start to change the way that we actually do our communities, actually do design our buildings, how do we actually live with each other, and what kind of behaviors start to present itself that we have to adapt to when the sun is shining, the wind is blowing, and other kind of sorts of matters. So to be able to unpack these kind of conversations, we've invited some fantastic people, local South Australians here across many different disciplines. And as you all know, the ASBN, those are the kind of conversations that we're trying to facilitate, the interconnections between awareness of various disciplines and, of course, different backgrounds, because every single one of our panel members here have had a varied career and also experiences and a lot that they can bring to the table. So I'll firstly introduce them so you can get to know them a little bit. Now, first off, we have Heather Smith, who is an electrical engineer, a policymaker, and a Churchill Fellow. Her third career, as she said, is focused on community energy and, of course, this topic of our energy transition. She currently volunteers with Citizens-Owned Renewable Energy Network Australia, CARENA, and the Coalition for Community Energy, two of the organizations in this emerging community energy sector. She's also finalizing, amongst all this, she is also finalizing a PhD with UniSA, looking at what it takes to redesign our electrical system. Mainly unpacking microgrids and also local energy systems is the focus of the research. So welcome, Heather.
Thank you.
And we also have Luke Morton, who is the co-founder and COO of IO Energy, which is a South Australian clean energy company on a mission to maximize the use of affordable renewable energy. Of course, IO Energy being a South Australian based energy retailer, their whole motto is trying to get customers to pay less for clean energy by being smarter users. So a lot, not only about giving solutions for our everyday people, but also trying to educate them along the way. So welcome, Luke. And we also have Emma Clark, who is a registered architect and has been in design and construction industry for over 15 years, mainly with a focus of commercial, educational, multi-residential, and also interior architecture. Emma has actually chose construction as the next step in her design-based career and is a design manager with Built. And as her design manager, her journey has given her the opportunity to lead positive change through sustainable design and construction practices with significant social impact. Her key project at the moment is 60 King William, which no doubt will feature in some of the conversations that we have today. So thank you very much for joining us, Emma. Rounding out our panel is Quentin Roberts, who has a career spanning over 20 years of engineering experience across industrial and commercial sectors, and including a decade specializing in energy. He actually founded his consultancy Efficiency in 2009. Today, he is a certified energy coach who is passionate about guiding businesses to buy, use, and produce energy innovatively, and also advises some of Australia's largest energy users. He is also one of the country's leading specialists in ISO 50001, which is an international standard of energy management systems. And he is also actually being able to be an energy coach to a lot of these organizations, trying to figure out what are the best opportunities in their energy procurement. Doesn't just make sure he's guiding some fantastic organizations to improve their sustainability, but in 2018, he initiated the Tonsley Future Energy Consortium to actually facilitate greater collaboration between innovative and like-minded energy organizations, really trying to bolster sort of the energy, human energy and actual electrical energy toward a low carbon future. And he also co-founded the SAH2H Hydrogen Technology Cluster in South Australia as well. So as you can see, we have quite a varied, varied disciplines and experience across the board. So we hope that through our conversation, you'll be able to get a lot of different perspective, nuance, and also be able to take this opportunity to question, tease out some really good perspective from these fantastic people. So the way that we play the game here, as part of some of our We Declare panel sessions, what we'd like to do is we're gonna lob up some questions for our panel. We're gonna chew on that for a little bit, maybe get the conversation on some rails. And then the fun part though is being able to tease out where you all would like to steer the conversation. And you all also includes our community on Zoom today as well. So as we're having a chat, please feel free to pop some questions in the chat if you're on Zoom. And if perhaps while we're having a conversation, you'd like to ask a question or also provide some perspective even yourselves for the conversation, please either give me some eye contact, raise your hand, and we'll see how we go.
Do we have to avoid eye contact if we don't want to participate?
That could be possible as well. You can, anytime that I kind of browse around, you're just like, look away. But we definitely do want to encourage as much participation as possible. So that's the fun bit. Are y'all ready to go? Fantastic. Y'all ready to go?
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Fantastic. So we have two different topics that we just want to get the ball rolling. And the first sort of aspect is being able to take note of like where we're at now, right? No doubt because of the high penetration of renewables and things like that, it's the grid is creating different opportunities here for us in South Australia. So my question across the panel, first come, first serve on the response, but how has renewable technology for buildings as well and precincts, as well as the flooding of green energy into the grid, has already changed the way that we conceptualize our buildings and how we actually use them in our cities? How do you feel that we can already feel the impact of how we have to kind of like shift some things around what we do in hard infrastructure as well as potentially even some soft infrastructure? First come, first serve.
Do you want to go?
I'll start
Yeah.
off. Well, just from a district or precinct point of view, my business is down at the Tonsley precinct, so that's a good example of how things are transitioning. So that's a microgrid system, which I'm sure Heather will make a few more comments on. But yeah, there's just so many more options these days. And down at that site was an old car factory sort of reuse, but yeah, they're about to take it into the Australia's largest rooftop solar array, and yeah, they had a nice sawtooth there to work with, so that was good. About to roll out battery there, and they've got the hydrogen electrolyzer down on that site as well. So yeah, there's just a lot more options available now, which is good, and more to come in the future.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a little bit of when now that it's actually happening, there's an understanding of what kind of benefits actually come out from there, whether it's from a financial standpoint or whether it's like the greenhouse gas emissions and things like that. But I'm pretty sure there'll still be a little bit of discussion around the financial viability of things like microgrids or whatnot, which would also be kind of an interesting outcome of how these South Australian initiatives are already testing with models that help other people feel that they're de-risking kind of investments.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's what I do.
Yeah.
In my day to day is I'm helping to explain what these options are, and I guess there's a beautiful thing about the options that we have, but then there's the other side of you also need to increase energy literacy of people and clients as well. On okay, we've got all these tools available, but how do we actually use them, and what is the best combination to use them? And then, not even mentioning that, customers are accessing the market more readily, which, I'm sure other panelists will talk about as well. So, I love it because, there's just so many options. But, I think at times the clients do struggle a little bit with, where do I start? Solar is probably the easiest thing that they can think about, and energy efficiency, which are, great and important. But there's just a plethora of things that they can utilise these days.
All right, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I'm not an architect or really involved in construction at all, so I don't know if I'm qualified to talk about how we think about our buildings and cities. But there's got to be some element of self-sufficiency that's leaking into the collective consciousness, right? I mean, people are certainly thinking to themselves that they can provide all of the power they need. They'll never need to visit a petrol station again. That their home is their castle, in a way that it wasn't before. Some people would go so far as to say they want to get off grid, even and whereas others are comfortable with simply providing for their own needs. So that's got to be one way we think about it. It might be, I feel, a little bit antisocial to go so far as to say that you should get off grid, because actually the grid is a remarkable social invention, right? And it's a way for us to trade and share in a sense. I mean, to be fair, historically it's just been one directional, but in the future it's going to be multiple paths.
Yeah.
And so I mean, certainly at IO Energy, we think you should stay on grid, but if you want to just provide for yourself, or just get a bit more savvy about how you use energy, that's okay.
Yeah, and of course with IO Energy, y'all actually provide some different carrots to actually start to think about how do you actually start to reconceptualize what do you have in the infrastructure that you have in offices or even homes.
Yeah.
To be able to, I guess, fully optimize being able to utilize when there's renewable energies going into the grid, and understanding that is actually cheap energy when it comes to retailers and things like that. So would you be able to give us some insight around, it's almost, that sounds like business accounting, that kind of changes the game for us sometimes, not just about the specific hard infrastructure, so to speak.
I guess, our mission is to maximize the use of affordable renewables. And this is important because we're approaching a point, particularly in SA, where variable renewable penetration is more or less the greatest of any grid at size. Where we don't just need more renewable supply, we need more renewable demand. What's the point of generating electricity if nobody's using it? So we're trying to balance those two things in a sense. We're trying to encourage people to use that clean electricity in the middle of the day. And we do that in a variety of ways. We do that through price signals that encourage, reward people for using that power. And we're trying to educate our customers a little bit that it's good to use that power. And increasingly, we'll try and also assist them with technologies that make it easier.
Yeah. And I was going to, so thank you very much for that, Luca. I was also going to ask Heather to kind of, just wanted to bring you in on a round of, we're talking about a bigger, just sort of the grid that we're all sort of attached to and things like that. However, when it comes to a little bit more democratization of that energy, whether it's with microgrids or community energy, how do you kind of see that playing how do you see that already starting to shift the way communities might conceptualize
so before
things?
Let me sneak up on that part of it. I'm really intrigued that your question was from a built environment perspective, right? Obviously, that's your audience. But I struggle with it because I'm coming from everything we need to do in the electricity system. And the building designers haven't caught up yet, but the households, we've captured the household imagination, but solar panels are, one of the biggest investments, renovation investments people have made, really. I don't know to what extent they're really in the new build sector. And maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe the fact that they're in the renovation sector is there. We've seen, I want my solar panel to be as big as possible because solar panels have got so cheap. I may as well build it as big as possible. And so the grid is going, oh, whoa. But that's all consumer choice. We've got these two big sectors with overlapping structures, and they draw it for transport as well. Vehicle to grid, they say, hang on, you've got a whole lot of structures in the electricity sector that have to catch up with where transport's going. You've got a whole lot of structures in the transport sector that have to catch up. Now, you put construction, building design in there, you got to catch up with both of those, and they've got to catch up with you. So I think there's something really interesting happening here where you've got a bit of consumer demand, but it is slap on. You can put solar panels on as an afterthought. But here we come going, the juggernaut of electricity system needs flexible load. It needs energy efficiency in different ways from the way you've done before. Maybe getting your lobby around 7-star rating working isn't the most important thing for you to do in the next 3 years. Maybe getting it around flexible load is way more important, because otherwise those householders who say, oh, don't give me 5 kilowatts, give me 10. You've given me a nice big roof, because we're all going bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Put 10 kilowatts on there. Get told half that energy is useless. We're not going to let you put it out onto the grid, right? So we've got these big structures that need to be talking to each other.
Yep.
One of the advantages of community energy, well, it's going to try and solve the problems at the local level, because the people most upset about being told they can't export their solar energy are at the local level. And remember, the electricity networks have always monitored their system to the sort of town level, suburb. There's 4 big transformers across Adelaide. They monitor it down to that and have a bit of an idea. Down at the next level, where they're saying, whoa, stop, we're causing problems on the system. They don't know an awful lot about their system. But the locals do. They know if they've had voltage problems. They know if their solar panels are performing, and they know if they've been told they can't export. So come along with flexible load. We've got the whole hot water thing going on. Well, how many of you guys think about hot water in the middle of the day now when you design a new building? It should be the first thing. Hot water's huge. Unless you do heat pumps, then it's smaller. We've got the vehicles coming along. They can be as big as a house, right, in terms of how much energy they need if you're a big driver. So where are you going to put that? How are you going to make that be, make good use of the electricity infrastructure? So there's some really interesting stuff. And I guess I see community energy, you're right, democratising it, but even inviting the conversations. Like, if we are genuinely heading into rapid change, which we all hope we are, we need rapid conversations. We need lots of them between now and 2025 and again to 2030. Lots is going to change.
Yeah, that's really, I really appreciate you kind of like bringing up a lot of those kind of considerations, especially because we do, because you have like a little bit of this tension between everyone, like you said, everyone at the moment trying to just maximize yield rather than thinking about like smarts, which also going back to like behaviors, and also about like how we share electrons around and things like that, whether it's big macro scale or micro scale. So there's definitely a lot for us to kind of like unpack on that one. But before we do, I also want to bring Emma in a little bit, because you're obviously working on a much larger scale. You're looking after a building that is actually has very high sustainability aspirations, and I was wondering if you can kind of give us a little bit of peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, absolutely.
About what
and it's interesting.
Energy thing
three
is.
going first, because coming from a design background and a construction company, so we tendered the project throughout 2020 and the design started way back in 2018. So in terms of change and technology, that's way back down the line. So along our tender process in 2020, we've got the documents, we're looking at gas-fired boilers, HFC refrigerants, all this kind of stuff, and we were putting forward options to replace with heat pumps and HFC and just giving some uplifts, not ready for at time of tender. And so then we got the job, started designing at the front end, obviously, and 4 months down the track, back on the table. And so interesting to see that the client consciousness is changing and developing, but obviously technologies are developing a lot faster than the collective whole, but we are, pushing and trying to keep up with the change and to adopt where we can. So, design and construct contract, there's quite a lot of opportunity to action these things and put them forward for discussion and try and involve and initiate some positive change there. But things are changing very quickly, so acknowledge that.
And with like a building that's going there's a lot of discussion right now in the especially buildings and precinct sphere of trying to go all electric and things of that nature.
Yes.
Has that put many strains on sort of like the design process at all, or trying to make things fit, or all that kind of stuff?
So it was a whole plant room redesign, obviously, and spatial pressures. Happily, we could solve the puzzle, but
requires some creative engineering.
That's it. But it was a positive change. Everyone was on board, so I think we're all going to make it work. But I think if we start with a brief today, it'd be a much different brief from when it was written in 2018, and there'd be aspirations that would then hopefully push further and keep developing. So I think it's been quite a kind of a revealing process on how the state of play is at the moment with change.
And that public imagination,
that's
in the
right.
space of 2 years,
Yes.
people went from assuming a gas boiler is okay
And
to being quite clear that a gas boiler is
and
not what you need in your future.
I think
Unless it's got some hydrogen.
well, that's right. And that's the next step.
And where were you when they needed the
That's
hydrogen boiler?
So so I think building operation, carbon neutral operations is becoming the baseline, whereas it wasn't like that 6 months ago for us anyway. So that's positive.
Could I tease out a little bit around this discussion that Heather, you talked about flexible loads? I was wondering if y'all could actually provide us with a little bit more insight on what that actually means, and what does that actually look like, and how perhaps is it being addressed at the moment? Like, how do you see it happening right now?
Let me give you a big picture.
Yeah.
I crunched some numbers for South Australia, and I did it by bumping up the wind and bumping up the solar and seeing where we get to 100%. And in most months, you had about the right supply and demand, but in October, you had this huge peak of extra renewable energy. And in one still month in winter, you had a real glut, right? Even though across the year. So you've got this, the wind and the solar are both really important. They're both really unstorable, unmanageable, variable in that sense. And you're always going to have an opportunity to move stuff into the solar time of day throughout summer and the autumn, spring months. But through winter, you're really going to start to rely on your wind to be that renewable source. So to me, the reason I said flexible load and not just daytime load is that daytime load only helps one part of that equation. But if you can control your hot water, for example, you're going to set it to daytime for 6 or 8 months of the year, but you're going to set it to wind time And wind time's not as predictable as daytime, but you're going to set it to wind time the rest of the time. And that plays out in the wholesale market prices, right? And you would see that. Look, the cheapest energy is when the wind farmers and solar owners are being forced to throw the stuff away. So to build our system with that in mind, Australia's always going to be solar and wind. These are our two big resources. Bit of hydro, obviously, we're spending $2 billion on that. You stand in other countries, and in New Zealand, you go, whoa, this is the land of hydro and geothermal. Look at it all around me, right? So every country has its own narrative, and some of our local areas have their own narrative, but we've got this dominating theme around solar and wind, and that's what we should be thinking about as we bring our built form to meet our renewable future.
Yeah. And Quentin, I was just wondering from your aspect of helping organizations, potentially making the most out of this kind of stuff. Do you see that as more of an opportunity that they have to look at around like the procurement side of things of energy, or what about like the technology integration to help with this kind of like variable aspect? Because we're having high penetration, but now we have to figure out how do we actually almost like move with it, so to speak, rather than being very static.
Well, I think, mainly I operate in the industrial area, but we do have commercial clients, and from a technology point of view, most of the time, the bigger buildings certainly have their BMS systems, so building management systems, so there is tech and control to a certain extent, and I'm sure King William would have that pretty hunky-dory. And in the industrial sense, yeah, the control systems are out there, the technology is out there, but probably just not the thought and the awareness of, okay, how do we now use that and make the most of it? So that's some of the things that we would help them with. But SA Water is a good example of an organisation that have got that understanding and now leveraging sort of their assets. So they have a lot of storage inbuilt with their reservoirs, pipelines, and so yeah, they're using that to great effect now, because they've had that awareness, but yeah, I'd love to see that go out to a broader field. And so company and organisations realise what an opportunity they have got. So I think we're all here trying to do that education, but even now I'll talk to companies that still don't understand just the very basics of demand management. So this is the daytime or responding to just the tariff drivers, let alone the spot market type drivers. So yeah, there's still some work to be done in that space, but I'm very confident about the technology and innovation backing that's there. It's just, okay, now let's use that and apply it with the new set of rules, I guess, if you like. It's more than just, okay, yeah, it's not just conditioning our building alone. How can we be smarter about using all those different loads and supplying together?
You asked about energy flexibility. I feel I can speak to that at the house level. In my view, there are three energy principles of a sustainable house. It's energy economy, energy efficiency, and energy flexibility. Economy is about using the least power necessary. Efficiency is about getting more benefit from less input, and flexibility is about using energy when it's cleanest and it's cheapest. So fortunately, all of these three things work together very well. So if you have an economical home, you can be much more flexible, because the greatest demands in a home tend to be heating, cooling, air, and water. And if your house keeps a nice thermal, or it's thermally stable, then you can change the time that you run your air conditioner or your heater, and it'll kind of keep that heat, and you don't need to worry about it disappearing in 5 minutes. And then if you do that, well, then you can take advantage of the fact that the market is rewarding people to use cleaner electricity because it's abundant and it's really cheap to generate. And then and you can use those savings to then buy more efficient appliances, which then mean that you get greater output for your input. And so these three things.
Or
work together.
controls.
Or controls, yeah, you can start to, invest in sort of programming some things about the house. So these three things work together really well. It's why, we as an energy company want to be a part of the ASBN, because you guys build economical homes, like thermally stable homes. And so you're 1/3 of the way there, I guess, at least, maybe probably 2/3, because everybody knows about heat pumps and whatnot. But yeah, and then, perhaps a point of disagreement with you, Heather. You said that we need to be like flexible. I can't remember exactly how you expressed it. You said be entirely flexible rather than just use daytime load, flexible load rather than daytime load. And I think you're right, technically speaking, but surely daytime load is like solving 90% of the problem, for much less effort. So if we
Certainly it's going to solve the local problems, because as we all get enamored with, we've already got problems on our local energy grid, and they're not caused by big wind, they're caused by local solar. And if 1/3 of your houses in your street have solar, where's the room for the other 70% to have solar if you're already having export problems from your street, right? So we've got a massive equity problem, and that's going to be solved around local solar, local batteries. We're seeing in the Victorian government fund 20 feasibility studies on local batteries to really start the conversation about fixing some of those things there. But yeah, I think ultimately you will want your hot water to be able to go, oh, this is the middle of winter and I've used all my sun, but there's cheap wind to be had.
There's always going to be some variability, but I feel on average, daytime load is pretty much solving most of the problems. The grid is peaking at 85% renewable at 1 p.m. versus 42% renewable at 7 p.m, and that's a 12-month average. So, even though there's some seasonal variation, certainly we're trying to keep it simple for people. It's more about daytime.
And from a design perspective, do you think our built environment starts to look different because of this at all? Like, we're talking about things are changing.
Yeah.
Carbon neutral is going to be good. Like carbon neutral operations is sort of like where we're heading. Electrification, there's potential for storage and even hydrogen somewhere down the line. But do you think that's currently actually changing? When people think about future kind of discussions, it's like, oh my goodness, it's going to be so different.
Well, I think we're evolving as we speak and understanding, incrementally, bit by bit, what it actually means for each and every person in the membership of the team. So if it's have a spatial impact and a footprint impact from the architect and the services consultants have to work out how to make it work, and then the client has to work out what that means for them. So yeah, I think we're all moving in the right direction of education and understanding and receptiveness, but there's a lot to take on and there's a lot of moving parts, and there'll be different applications that will be optimal for different situations. So there's not a one-stop shop or solution for each project, but it's certainly having an impact, but I think everyone's taking it on board and developing with it, and the project that I'm immersed in seems to be proving that, even though it might not be quite up to where current thinking is, it is catching. So it's a good trend.
Yeah.
How much thermal flexibility can you build into a building? Because it's easy for us to sit there going, thermal storage, it's way cheaper than battery storage and it'll last for the whole life and it gives you comfortable buildings. And it's 50% of housing energy if you take hot water and cooling and heating, but maybe it should be much lower for a start, right?
Yeah.
But it's some massive chunk.
Yes.
But what's realistic in terms of being able to push all of the, charging load into the middle of the day. or-
Yeah.
And be able to manage your real needs.
Either
First thing in
side
the
of that.
morning
Yeah,
or-
yeah.
I mean, it's not the same for a commercial building, but the challenge is still there, right?
Yeah, the principle's the same, isn't it? Yeah. The short answer, I'm not sure at this point, but I think that's something that, yeah.
They do that a lot more in the US. Like they have a lot of district energy programs where, under buildings, there's swimming
they have
pools worth of ice.
The
You know,
whole,
yeah, And they
yeah.
can, it's not just to serve one building, it's more like a group
like
of
a
buildings or
bank,
even
yeah.
a city or town wide. So, we haven't quite brought up to that
No.
yet. but-
Yeah.
Well, that's where I was gonna steer the conversation a little bit more, kind of like banking off of what you were saying, is like, kind of was around like, we're adapting currently in real time, essentially, as we're kind of experiencing what is available, what has been actually tested and a little bit de-risked, so we can more project and, understand the granular a little bit. Whether it's like renewable energy technology or us like market systems and things like that, are we going to have to start getting used to seeing new things? Like from your perspective, what are the things that we might see around the city? What are the things that we might see in our homes or even our commercial buildings more? That we're just going to have to understand that that's going to be part of our new reality in a renewable future.
Are we going to see new things or are we going to adopt new practices? So there's two quite interesting parts there. One of the community battery discussions that ANU did, they interviewed a bunch of industry people, energy industry people, so all the network engineers are going, oh yeah, this can solve this and solve this. Excellent, let's get on and build it. And they workshopped it with communities, and communities went, who owns it?
Yeah.
Who controls it? Are we communists or are we capitalists? How are we going to do that? So for the community, it was instantly a political conversation, but it never occurred to the network engineers that it might be a political conversation. So we, in our climate transition, have a whole excited conversation about technology, and I get swept up in that too, because what's the point of an engineering degree if you don't? But maybe the challenges that we're really struggling to change are the social ones. And with this discussion of load flexibility, you've got the cheapest things to do will be the social practices, but will we adequately allow them to play in the whole game? Will Luke be able to empower consumers, or will it just be set and forget and we'll get some technology to fix everything and disempower consumers? So you've got quite a tussle going on as a conversation at the moment about who controls it, who should control it, what is it? Are you gonna mix low tech with high tech? Are you really gonna empower people or not? So I'll just shut up because let others have a say.
I think I'll answer it on three levels, I think. So on the surface, the obvious answer is you're going to see more electric appliances and fewer alternative fuels, fossil fuels like petrol, diesel, wood, and methane.
Especially in Australian context.
Especially in Australia, yeah. So, I mean, that's the obvious answer. That's the tangible stuff. Then, like, under that level, you're gonna see a kind of a bit of a trend. I mean, we're going to go from a period where people don't think about energy at all, and the networks and the generators are pretty happy for them to kind of be dumb and happy and just consume as much as they could, to a period where people feel like they have to be incredibly informed, and they talk about it a lot. And then eventually, when technology finally solves all of these integration problems we have, back to a period where you don't have to worry about it anymore because the tech takes care of it all. So this will be the arc, I think. And then And then you'll also see on like a final level and a social level, there's going to be a lot of angst in the middle because the truth is we haven't solved all the problems yet. So it's, and you're going to have to change your mindset as a homeowner because you are going to go from a lot of people are going from a period where they're just treated as a consumer. And so you get, consumers' rights and it's all about you, to a period where all of a sudden you got solar panels. So you're also a generator. So you're going to be treated just like Origin or AGL in the market. Right? You have to engage with the market in a way that's appropriate so that we don't overburden the grid. And currently a lot of people who have solar panels don't get this. They feel like, some of the measures that have been taken, like solar taxes or, anti-competitive measures. But really it's kind of, it's an effort to solve some of these technical problems that we have. And then finally, we will solve the technical problems and we'll go back to
not have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Thank God someone's already figured things out in our lives, right?
Exactly. It's all sunshine. Yeah.
I need to add another perspective if I can.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Forgive me for talking hydrogen again, but I'm an electrical engineer, so I'm a big fan of electricity. But just in terms of the broader conversation, we won't get to net zero without hydrogen industry. And yes, it's possibly more in that heavy transport industry level. But one of the key parts of that transition, even incorporating hydrogen, is actually blending it into the gas networks. So we can't, just like with the poles and wires, we can't just delete them. Like there's a infrastructure there, and the gas companies are very very active in. I don't work for a gas company, but just to balance it, they're very active in their ambitions for basically renewable gas. So to give you an idea, we had at Future Energy Week last week, there was a hydrogen day. The gas network company there said that by 2025, they want to have a 10% blend into the network of hydrogen. So that's, domestic users as well as commercial. By 2040, they want to have 100% renewable gas available. So that could be precincts, but they're talking about their whole network.
Yeah.
So, and we are seeing a technology trend. I know it's not there right now, but I think in a very short space of time we'll have it at that larger scale level in the commercial. But I'm seeing technologies developed that, and even appliance companies are starting to get their appliances, whether it's a Sealy with their, have a gas heating equipment. So that they're, for example, developing a 20% hydrogen blend ready unit. That there's others developing, ready for greater blends than that. So we can't actually forget the fact that renewable gas will still be an option, even for households at some point in the future.
I'm going to put a bet on with Quentin. We're going to come back in 2040 and have a long-term bet. It's really interesting though, isn't it? How much you as building designers encode that basic choice right from day one, right? And it's interesting that it's actually quite a political discussion at the moment. So are you going to encode household choices by the way people understand the climate change conversation today, and who's going to win that battle of good and bad, sort of how people, the storytelling battle really about what the future looks like.
Which way are you betting, Heather?
Oh,
Yes.
I think hydrogen's got a niche, and it will have a niche, but I don't think it'll be as widespread as but my ambition for the future is premised on us taking down the gas industry. So are we powerful enough? They're going to fight to the end.
Yeah, well, I think if they are cleaning up their act, that's okay. I would encourage them to yeah, be very ambitious, yeah, make their version of the grid, renewable.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of, pushing them and trying to build an industry so they, that is another option.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And let's remember their input fuel is virtually free. Right, so we've got enough surplus happening already. They used to say of nuclear power that it'll be too cheap to meter. Well, we are in the era of too cheap to meter, like nuclear, solar and wind are all capital, minimal running costs. So this whole zero marginal cost, what it gets applied to is really interesting.
And, sorry, just to finish that little conversation, with the daytime load that we talked about, so hydrogen is a very useful big load and you can then store the energy, kind of like a battery, but you've got the option for us to export that as an energy as well, a lot easier. So that's why I think it's important to have in the conversation, because I think it helps to solve, that big dip in the middle of the day, and we've got some more flexibilities, and I think there's room for both to play. Like I'm not.
Yeah.
It's kind of what Heather said. It's the right thing for the right application. So
Exactly.
but together,
And of course, that's not all. We should not only kind of acknowledge the opportunity from like an operational standpoint, but especially when you said it'll play a very big part in industry. There's a lot of materials that the built environment utilizes, whether it's many products that are manufactured, heavy industry materials, steel, concrete, and things like that. So if perhaps we actually have an opportunity to reduce the manufacturing impact through hydrogen rather than things around like natural gas or coal, or just fossil fuels to actually make those materials. That's probably already coming into conversation.
Yeah, that's really
with-
our one of our biggest focus at the design front end is to reduce the embodied carbon in our concrete and steel. And so we look at the design, try and rationalise, reduce volumes, and then look at the mixes, and that would be, and how we transport and process.
And I guess that's the reason why it's really important to have these kind of discussions around what are not all the opportunities and where it might be leading. It's because the built environment isn't just around like how do we use it, what do we see, but it's also like what it's made of, what is the supply chain, so to speak, and energy in some form or fashion will enter all those different kind of like conversations. So it's really interesting like how things will actually go. I did want to open up for questions from the floor.
First one is perhaps a directed one to Emma. Can you let us know what you expect to be happening with the ABCD with next year's residential side with thermal bridging, whether that will go through or not? And secondly is my big, which may be a grenade, which is playing off, given that hydrogen electrolyzers cost a lot, batteries cost a lot, wind turbines cost a lot, the playoff between financing and capital expenditure and operational expenditure with all these changes, because they're massive changes and they're going to be shifting things quite strongly. And the only way I can see it at the moment is that is the access to cheap finance to allow capex to take place to minimise OPEX.
If it's a
But first, Emma's.
Sorry. What in particular did you want to know about?
No, just what do you think it's going to go through? It's still up in
did you
the
want
air.
me to divert that one?
Yeah,
The main reason is because I'd say, I mean, a lot of your experiences in sort of the commercial sphere.
Yes,
and
yeah.
You've already experienced sort of like the upgrade of the NCC in 2019 on that.
Yes, that's correct.
How that's affected like the commercial realm.
Yes, exactly. So, I'm I'll have to wait and see.
But the second question around, being able to do like the flexible loads and things like that, that probably will come down to things around storage. So could, anyone give us some perspective on, like the return on investment, almost like what will actually allow, more, whether it's like households, organizations, people that invest asset investment, how will the capital expenses like start to open up, for return on investment of storing some of this energy, or creating it, electrolyzers and things?
I mean, electrifying Australia is probably a $1 trillion challenge, which is pretty cheap, I guess, by global standards. Small population, and we're in a pretty good position in the pack. The question of, like, what's the balance of capex and opex? Well, I guess the positive is that we know that by electrifying and using renewables, like there will be lots of operational savings. So one thing that at IO, we're pretty small, clean tech startup, but we've already started to look into like, how do we capitalize those savings? How can we knowing that there will be savings, how do we finance those assets for the customer so that they can more or less get it like free the entire time? They get free up front and they get it, cheaper for the rest of its life. And yet we're all better off. So it's possible, we think.
And you see some trials on that with even like some virtual power networks and things like that, around, some suppliers will actually fund a little bit of that capital expense. But from my awareness also, there's a lot of finance going into things around like green financing, green bonds and things like that, not everyone knows how to really tap into. But has that kind of come up in conversations quite a bit? You're shaking your head, Quentin?
Yeah, just with my hydrogen hat on, we've had a lot of chats with even international companies and investors. So a lot of the super funds, etc., have got a consciousness now about investing into green projects. So yeah, well, from what I'm seeing on that larger scale, it's not so much a case of can we get the money for it. It's more about creating the demand and giving them the opportunity.
Right. So it's almost like the finances might actually be there. You just have to make the right project.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
In my PhD, I've sort of characterised that start of the market as a big government phase, and this is electricity, and I'd be intrigued to see how it plays in construction. So a lot of the decisions were made by engineers and argued for by engineers, and we still have tentacles of big government in electricity decision making. Like, you don't get $2 billion for snowy hydro because someone did a really competitive business case. You don't get these transmission lines being built, like they've had to go through a regulatory process that's about economic efficiency, and then they've been given a nudge by the New South Wales government and the South Australian government, right? So infrastructure lends itself to big government. Definitely since the 90s, we've been in big market, and what we've seen is the electricity industry focus its attention, didn't do it overnight, focus its attention on efficiency and efficient decision making. I'd like to think big markets having got to have a bit of a crisis. It is at odds, it's the nemesis of climate change. So what comes next? Like, do we swing back to patient capital, long-term investments? Certainly in community energy, patient capital is one of the things we talk about, that communities will invest in things not because they're desperate for 8% returns. Actually, just getting their money back would be enough, but to know that in their community they've set it on a long-term path that's going to help more than just themselves. That's some of the language that's used in community energy sort of financing stuff. So, in terms of what's capital going to do, I think we've got interesting times ahead in terms of how we pull the resources for the rapid transition.
Which is why I posed the question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we can't throw the cost down the road, really, can we?
No, no,
You know,
I mean-
it's actually a massive upfront capital cost, like you said. It's a zero cost in for operating. Someone tweeted, you know, with the gas crisis in Europe, solar is the new commodity. And someone else said, yeah, but when your solar prices go up, everyone who's already installed solar isn't crucified. You know, and what we saw in Europe this winter was everybody was crucified because gas prices spiked and the whole place went berserk over the cost of gas.
what about sun cable, you know, to Singapore?
That's right,
That's
but aren't all of these markets at the end capital
Yeah,
markets?
this is
You
why I
know,
posed the question.
yes, we're paying for gas commodities, but it's some fossil fuels, capital infrastructure and sunk investment. You know, that's why it's all chop that off, stop spending the money over there, stop subsidising it.
But thanks for putting the question up for that, John. We had a question over here as well.
Yeah, so we've talked about how quickly the market is changing, and in the environment that most of us work in, which is construction and built form and design, some of those lead times can be really long. 60 million, you know, by the time you finish, by the time someone actually put the first brief out,
Yeah.
might be 10 years. If we look at urban developments, they might stage that over 10 years, you might be designing it for 5. So first of all, is it realistic that we can predict the future when we've got so many different technologies going on? And second of all, if it is an expectation that we do that, how can we best manage that in the design process?
How do we look over the horizon and keep a few options open?
Yep, a very good short summary of
Earlier, Heather said that, you know, when you design and construct a building, you encode certain information into that building. And then you kind of also provided this follow-up that you said, like, how do you maintain optionality? Well, one thing I think you can do is you can sort of perhaps place your best bet and then make sure that, you know, the building is fitted for, but maybe not necessarily with other technologies. So one thing that's almost certain is that the future is electric.
Quentin would disagree.
Quentin would disagree. And you know, and
Nah.
there
There are
is
different markets.
there is a role.
Hydrogen.
There is a role for hydrogen for sure. You know, I would say, you know, make sure that the building is designed in a way that it might accommodate, you know, like hydrogen piping in the future.
Well, it's actually the same, I think. Yeah, as long as it's poly, it can do.
But how much of that is, how many existing building stock are going to have standard pipes? I'm a gas fitter by trade, who hasn't installed a gas appliance in about 6 years, because I don't see a future in it. I did disconnections. But most building stock out there, the pipe work that's in it is old gelf, being building stock. The cost of upgrading all those bills and upgrading the appliance, you've already got an electrical connection to the house. Put heat pumps on, put solar on it, you're done.
Yeah, no, I'm not actually against that at all, and that's probably what I do in my own house. But if the infrastructure is like, I know there's been a lot of safety upgrades in the gas network, which has got, you know, the poly, like hydrogen doesn't like steel pipes basically. So yeah, if it is there and you can use it, yeah.
How much it makes the end use when it, because the molecules are smaller than hydrogen, when it's passing through that pipe. So at Tonsley, you're putting hydrogen in, got that flag up, we're doing a blend, fantastic. How much of it the end user, when they turn on their gas cooker, is actually hydrogen still coming out?
Well, it's 5% at the moment.
Injection at the beginning.
Yeah.
But all the infrastructure and pipework in there with the molecules being small and, you know, yeah, you can't tell me that the plumber went and put all the suitable fittings in there and there's stuff, you know, hydrogen's leaching out because the molecules are smaller. How much of that actual point where it's being consumed by the end user is actually hydrogen?
There's,
I'm a gas fitter by trade.
which is,
So I'm interested in that process. I don't think there's a future in it residentially at all. Like, I understand industrially, perfect, fantastic. Transport, getting it off overseas, happy days, but into the home, there is no future. Then you've got air quality issues, so like, you're burning hydrogen, how do you manage the air quality in a home that's more sealed? There's too many problems with it.
Yeah,
I've been
we'll
wondering
take
about
that.
resilience.
Yeah.
Like, all of us get the camping stove out when the electricity fails. Do we all want to put our eggs in the electricity basket? All of them?
Which
in the
comes back,
electricity basket?
which
So
kind of
there's
come
an
back to the question at kind of like hand is that how do we almost like hedge our bets in a lot of this, because how do we make sure that we're not caught out?
Yeah. So sorry, because that was really interesting, but just to finish my point. So I think if you're going to encode anything, encode optionality. Start with what we know to be working right now, which is electrification and renewables, and then try and keep up the sleeve the option to install or have hydrogen if these ambitious targets are met by 2040. That's probably how I answer that.
And from a building and also design management kind of standpoint, is trying to think of all those options appreciated, or does that kind of create a little bit too much complexity?
No, so there's always options, and that's part of the course. But I suppose if you take a broader view and you consider potentially, poly pipes for hydrogen in the future, along with, will there be a client out there that's willing to put the cost in to put two, risers and the provision for, which comes at a cost to future-proof, that there may be, but that really, we need to bring the developer along with us.
Yeah.
And
How many
systems are
developers do you
brittle.
know, Emma, that would say yes?
Well, we've got plenty of options happening at the moment. So I think with the growing public consciousness and awareness, all the big developers have sustainability managers and department. I wouldn't say it's out of the question. Yeah, I feel positive about that. But yeah, as to what technology, that will be the race probably.
And then
Systems are brittle when they are efficient, and they are more robust and resilient when you've overinvested, right? And capitalism likes, especially neoliberal capitalism likes efficiency. So it sets itself up for collapse in that sense. But of course, a lot of what we do isn't efficient. We've actually built it in via social practice, right? We all have a car that we use 10% of the time, if that, right? So we'd be kidding ourselves if we thought we didn't have any resilience in our lives. But I think a lot of market pressures do tend to squeeze systems in the wrong direction there.
so it's almost like we'll watch this space, but then be ready for different kind of aspects, I suppose. We had a couple of questions on Zoom.
Got one from Paul. As the price of electricity decreases, especially with high renewables, does this reduce the incentives to invest in efficiency measures and self-generation?
Thoughts on that?
I hope not, because I love efficiency. That's my business. I love it so much. I think that there's always a place for efficiency in my view, and I guess the simple way I like to think about it, if a footprint is more efficient, if it's one less or 2 or 5 or 10 less panels that you put on your roof that can be used elsewhere, maybe for someone that can't access it as readily, then that's a good thing, I think, in my view.
I think it's actually a really important equity question. So one of the big picture analyses says the energy return on investment on oil is 1 in 75. So you use 1 unit of energy to get the oil to market, and you get 75 units of energy out of that. As we come to solar and wind and lower ratios, the amount that we use to produce them versus the amount we get out of them in their lifetime, What we're actually doing is spending the endowment of fossil fuels, what they've given us in terms of prosperity, on the new infrastructure and sharing the benefits globally. Now, we've already got a lot of inequality, energy inequality encoded into our system. We're not going to tackle climate change unless we do it in a just manner. If we don't get serious about efficiency and give that opportunity to developing nations who are, there's something like 1 billion people who don't have access to electricity. And here we are talking about electricity is the future. If we don't give them efficient electricity opportunities to electrify, well, we've only got ourselves to blame when we don't bring the whole of humanity across to a sustainable future. And of course, we all know that's a massive risk at the moment.
Yeah, which not only sort of like globally, but even here in Australia, we need to acknowledge that there are different communities that might not be able to have that kind of access, which is where, you know, like the greater penetration of renewable energy kind of has the benefits from a global carbon emission kind of standpoint, but then it needs creative markets to also open up that from like an equity kind of like standpoint, correct?
Yeah.
How do you kind of view this loop around you're looking at the price market of energy and things like that as well?
Yeah, I previously said, you know, that economy, efficiency, and flexibility went together really well, and this is kind of an argument against that. And my answer to that would be both yes and no. So just to, you know,
Playing it straight down the
bench
line there.
myself, yeah. So
A resilient answer.
it's like, yes, it's true, because if electricity is too cheap to meter because of renewables, like you may as well just like use as much as you want, and efficiency is less important to you. But that's only going to apply at some of the time. Because at IO, like part of our strategic thesis is not just that daytime electricity is going to get cheaper, but also we believe that, you know, evening electricity and overnight electricity is going to get more expensive, because that's when, just through normal like patterns of life, demand tends to be highest. And, you know, it's also when the sun sets, and, you know, often the wind kind of dips in that time. And so, and we're not as optimistic about battery storage as other people are. You might be fine to have an electric hot water system rather than a heat pump for your hot water. If they're both charged during the day, that efficiency doesn't really matter then, but it sure as hell will matter for your home overall, for your air conditioning. Because if you need to run your heater or your air conditioner in the evening when prices are up peaking, then it's gonna hit you. It's gonna hurt you.
Yeah. Or even for commercial activities that might actually be happening at night. So like, let's just say hospitality, right? Things like that, right?
Yeah.
They might be running a lot at night. Are they going to suffer from higher evening kind of like prices that get to the market? Then of course, again, that kind of backs up the statement around making sure you have efficient systems and or you're investing in items that are able to store that electricity.
They will a little bit. I do worry a little bit about the nighttime economy and how that will deal with electrification if you know, prices are going to be really expensive during the 5 to 9 period when restaurants are doing the business. Maybe they're in the niche for hydrogen, you know, to get to kind of, you know, make sure.
I'm glad you mentioned
yeah. Or, you know, or they need to be just more efficient on how they use electricity. Yeah. Just to try and or be economical and efficient.
Yeah. Which is, you know, like again, that's the part that becomes very, very interesting, because a lot of things that we probably can't anticipate is where the electric price market kind of like ends up shifting. So it's again, how do we stay resilient to all of these things? And you're more resilient if you just need to use less power in the first place, right? Do we have a question?
I have one new question, but can be answered a little bit. But you're all dreamers, You're all looking into the future. Calculation into the future is, we have COP26, that's great. In your calculations, do we need the government to come along? Yes or no? Because we have the finance, we have the producers, we have the gas cleaning that, we have the consumers. The consumers have become producers. Pretty much, I get offers from banking to go solar with discount rates. Everything has now come on board. The political, at the state level, has come on board. Australia as a whole hasn't come on board. In your calculations, so we don't go to shit. We need the big politicals to come on board, or just by pure force of capitalism, we're gonna match it. And we're happy days. If they come on board, good. If they don't come on board, they didn't come on board. Do you reckon we're gonna meet those targets without them? Yes or no? Because if not, what we're doing and how we change.
What about yes and no? Because that was a good question.
The problem is, in
So
the
can I
big
say
question,
something?
there is no yes or no.
Can I say something about rapid change, right? So in socio-technical transitions, it doesn't look like anything's changing for a long, long time.
Yes,
And then you get quite a rapid change and a tail off. Now, in that moment of rapid change, you have lots of unknowns. So for a very short, relatively, if this is 50 years, this is only 5 or 10 years, you know, that classic photo of New York where you do spot the car a decade and a decade later you do spot the horse, right? So you've got this very rapid change, and what's happening in that is for a short window, lots of things become possible. There's a lot of powerful actors trying to control the pathway, and ultimately who comes out of that with the power does control it. And pretty quickly, your future path becomes determined. But what we're going to have is electricity is the vanguard, right? It's going through its rapid change, possibly already triggered by solar, right? They let the genie out of the bottle. I talked to people 10 years ago who went, you really better stop the feed-in tariff at 60 megawatts, right? You know, South Australia now has over 1,000 megawatts. They didn't get to put the genie back in the bottle, right? So definitely that sort of social change, and neoliberalism partly has enabled this because they've gone, oh yeah, no, we just need to let the market, no one's going to step in now. The change is going to happen. So say electricity moves really fast, the building designers are going to start running, right? You're running to catch up. You're all trying to understand, you know, Quentin's trying to push hydrogen in there and it might get a little bit of the pathway.
So stop beating up on Quentin. He also supports a lot of electricity as well. Jeez.
Transport's right behind us. That's being driven by places like Norway. They sold more electric cars than fossil fuel cars last year, right? They might be the juggernaut that comes faster than the electricity industry because transport's got lots of customers making lots of choices. Electricity's got lots of regulators slowing things down, right?
But Quentin, you like just last week, you've also hosted quite an enormous discussion from a conference around those kind of like aspects. So if you don't mind doing a little bit of reporting for us, what happened? Was there a lot of discussion on how does our government as an organization and agency help kind of push this in the right direction?
Yes, so yeah, Future Energy Week. So yes, I have been doing the hydrogen barrow tonight, but I'm very much an electricity person as well. But just so that's clear.
Yeah.
The Energy Week, yeah, we've had some amazing conversations. I had some politicians in there, and I don't think you can't do it without them. But I guess the main message was we need it quicker and faster than what they're doing it. But the encouraging thing I found that there's, I'm describing it as a convergence at the moment where the people power element is sort of, you know, in terms of clean energy transition, is as strong as I've ever seen it, and to the point now where some of, you know, shareholders are driving some of the activities of, you know, some of our big customers, like that people power is starting to work. So now I'm seeing the big corporates, you know, company, we need to work on our energy strategy. What do we do? Is there a bit of hydrogen? Is there a lot of, you know, electric, whatever that is, and we map that out. And I've been talking to them for a decade or more, going, hey, you need to, you know, there's so much you can do here to save and, you know, transition and all this kind of thing. And it's so hard for me to sort of push up the line, but now it's the shareholders and the, you know, the people power driving that down. So that's really encouraging for me. And I know the COP was disappointing for most of us, but I guess at least for me, I'm just trying to be the optimist, but they created a line in the sand with the net zero, and something like that, just having a target. Yep, we could bring it forward, we could do all types of things, but we've had nothing. You know, I've been, you know, trying to, you know, cling on to something out there for a very long time. So that was a start for me. But it's, yeah, the general feedback was from the conference that if we can keep pushing that message up the line, yeah, and I think more politicians are getting it. Yeah, not all, but yeah, I'm seeing it. Yeah, the momentum is there. Was my takeaway, which is encouraging for me, because I feel like there hasn't. I don't know that, you know, what sort of industry players. Yeah, we're trying. You know, my intention of putting on this week, which was an incredible effort, is to create space for those conversations.
Right, yeah.
If we're not getting the leadership from elsewhere, yes, industry and, you know, groups like this need to come together. Collaboration was the message of the conference as well, and I think, yeah, the politicians that were there, when they see a group of us coming together, you know, we're not silly people. There's some, you know, very smart people that we had around. So yeah, so it was a positive thing.
Given you're talking about an international conference, you know, obviously you must be talking about the federal government. My answer would be that I don't think the federal government is powerful enough to stop renewable energy at this point. It simply could not hold back the industry. It goes without saying that it would help if they were as ambitious as possible. And whether or not, you know, we can hit our climate targets without government assistance, I don't know. I don't know enough about, you know, the earth really, but I know that a lot of experts are saying that we certainly shouldn't wait. So that's my answer.
Just wrap up with one final question.
Might be here because I'm a newbie, but I'm seeing what people here. Coming to the topic, which is renewable future, regarding energy. Now we are really happy about solar, and we have windmills and stuff, which is helping together, which is working out nice. Because people and the students are all aware of solar, and then we are getting in more panels nowadays. Let's say in 10 years or 25 years, the panels are going to expire, and it might, I'm not sure how much you can recycle it and stuff, and they might go to a landfill. And even there are data which says even when we go to landfill nowadays, the old ones. So do you think there is something which is upcoming for the renewable energy, and which people are trying to look up for the future?
The life cycle. So the question around like the life cycle of some of these technologies.
Just a quick one, because we did have the discussion at the conference last week. So yeah, they've got a finite life. I guess on the innovation front, I was really encouraged to see progression, you know, from some of the universities in terms of their research on panels, like they can lay it out on all sorts of even organic, like natural sort of plastics and things like that are flexible. So yeah, there's some things coming around that. And also on some of the the companies that are involved in the solar space, while there's not an industry, you know, that at the moment for that type of recycling, but it's been on the dialogue. So I know some of the bigger companies are starting to bring that into their plan more, but yeah, we need some more. Yeah, we had sort of Green Industries, which is the state government department there, you know, talking about that, and then how do we close that loop? So I don't think all the answers are there yet, but that's why we've got to start that dialogue, and it has.
Because I feel at the end of the day, because now we are happy about renewable energy, but I'm just thinking at the end of the day, it might become a risk for climate and the land.
And environmental management, you know, that whole environmental chain. Have we given solar too long, in a sense? You know, they've had 15 years, and now we can all sit here going, oh, good, the solar industry is starting to take recyclability really seriously, and it'll be a game changer. Batteries, that whole a different set of chemicals and issues, and some of them repeating issues of the fossil fuel industry about where they extract their minerals and stuff. So how long do we give them? You know, how fast can we, how much time do you say, no, it's really important that you innovate and we're not going to put barriers in your way, and how fast can we bring them into circular economy? We're not going to tackle climate change unless we get all this stuff right. Don't have an answer, of course, but you're on the money.
Yeah, we did talk about batteries as well. So there was a significant battery manufacturer there that have just released their plan for recycling and
My answer to that is I think I'm confident that is a problem that will be solved. There are bigger problems I think we should focus on, and then also it seems there is a bit of a double standard. When that question is raised, not that but so I think it's solved largely because or will be solved because solar panels are 98% made of recyclable components, and as more of them are made, then there is increasing appetite for a recycling industry, and that should be. I think that will kick into gear just fine. There are probably bigger issues to solve because arguably there are entire buildings that are being made that won't last 25 years at the moment. There's like really crappy apartment buildings. Maybe I'm not being generous, but certainly, when you buy a place, 90% of the value of a property now is like encoded in the land. It's not the house, which might fall over in 50 years or at least be like refurbished. So that's a lot bigger problem than solar panels. And then the third thing is it's really weird that people apply that standard to things like solar panels and EVs, because when you buy an EV, people say, oh, but how much is it going to save you? Like, it'll save you nothing. Well, people don't ask that when they buy a petrol car. They say, oh, I bought it because I like the dash, or it's got cool seats. Nobody says like, oh yeah, like it's a different standard that they're being held up to, and the same thing I think applies to solar panels. It's worth asking, but I think like people twist that dagger a little bit more than they should, and it's a bit potentially critical.
I do like it being asked in the sense that I think that industry needs to get going, and that we probably should have, it should have been a conversation probably 10 years ago, but yeah, we really need to ramp that up so that we're ready, because there's going to be a batch of them in the next decade.
You continue to have the challenge that if you don't tackle these things in your ethos and philosophy and vision from day one, you actually undermine your ability to tackle climate change. So that the whole climate justice conversation says climate change doesn't get tackled without justice. Now, that's hard for us. Like you can imagine, just look, rich people but build nuclear power stations, build a whole lot of stuff, trample over people's rights, but fix the climate. right? So a bunch of people really believe that that will get a solution. Actually, there's 7 billion people on the planet, and there's a bunch of people that really believe you won't get a life that is worth living if you don't put justice first. And I think we don't really understand it enough. We haven't debated that. We haven't felt it deeply. We haven't put it as our primary philosophy.
And I think that's as we're trying to wrap up the conversation, we're opening up a whole new other conversation. But a lot of these aspects around equity, as well as considered thought, integration of even like design opportunities, not only just around the things that we create, but also then the systems that we create are very, very necessary. And that actually was an ongoing theme through our whole year of hosting these We Declare discussions, because you know, the series came about trying to actually hop on the energy around different organizations and governments actually declaring a climate emergency. So if we're actually going to be declaring a need to do something, then we actually still have to continue to think about what are the next kind of questions. So, you know, Emma's also kind of said, it's like, even in the construction industry, a lot of aspects around embodied energy, that's also sort of like the tip of the iceberg. How are we going to continue to think of the different systems and industries that are required to help us close that loop? On that note, I would like to kind of like wrap up this session. I really appreciate everyone's feedback, but if y'all don't mind, this is kind of off the cuff, but we do like to make sure that we can have like a summary statement from each of our panel members to kind of like take us out. And I was wondering if you might have a sentence of brilliance that you might be able to share with us.
What about the half dozen that I get?
Yeah. It's like, is there like a key? I mean, can we just almost think around like a theme or a thought? It's like, what are the key things that you feel all of us should take? Kind of like, I'll just go down the line so you can be first.
It's not on the spot. So the future is electric. 90% of the problem will be solved by using daytime load, and if you're building sustainable houses, I think you have a duty to know this, because the decisions you make are going to last for several decades from here on. So,
Emma, any key things that stood out for you that you thought were quite important?
Oh, I've enjoyed the discussion, and it's been great. I think from my role as a design manager, I think, as you know, the more discussions you can have to put the ideas on the table when you're with a client is the way that you can start to actually enact and get things adopted and start to push things forward. So you know, bit by bit, but I think it's a positive wind in the air.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think we're going to the future together. We're only going to get there if we go together. We don't have a lot of practice at making sure our shared aspirations are built into our systems and structures. And we're sitting here at a really important part of history where our built form, our transport systems, our food, water systems, and of course our electricity systems are all being pushed through gigantic change. So I think it's really important that we design them together.
Thanks.
Yeah, well, I think the clean energy transition is underway, but we need it to happen quicker and quicker as we can. And we're not going to do it just by ourselves or even as own individual companies. So I guess my encouragement always is to try and foster collaboration let's, if it's the architects, the engineers, whoever it is, getting together to think about these things. It'd be remiss of me if I didn't include hydrogen in my sentences. But I think hydrogen is part of that clean energy transition. I haven't got a crystal ball to say what, spectrum or scope it is, but I know you can't get to net zero without hydrogen. So it's going to be an important part of things, and don't ever forget about efficiency.
Yeah, sounds good. So if you all will all join me in thanking our and a special shout out again to Uniting Communities as our venue sponsor for allowing us to host in this space. Thank you so much.